In a bustling Chicago coffee shop, a polyglot translator was about to uncover the most devastating betrayal of her life. What started as casual dinner conversation took a shocking turn when she overheard Polish words never meant for her ears. Michelle Johnson wasn't your typical linguist. For years, she had mastered 5 languages, known for her ability to decode hidden meanings. When she encountered Tom's fluent Polish confession about managing 2 women, she had no idea she was walking into calculated deception. Michelle's decision to investigate would lead to exposing a serial manipulator who preyed on trusting women across Chicago's international community. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The German contract spread across Michelle Johnson's laptop screen like an intricate puzzle, each clause demanding precision that went beyond mere translation. She'd claimed her usual corner table at Café Europa 3 hours ago, positioning herself where the afternoon light wouldn't create a glare on her screen. The coffee shop's ambient noise, a careful blend of espresso machines, quiet conversations in multiple languages, and the soft jazz playing overhead, had become her preferred soundtrack for complex work. Michelle paused, her fingers hovering over the keyboard, as she considered the nuances of a particularly challenging paragraph about intellectual property rights. The client, a multinational pharmaceutical company, needed the translation by tomorrow morning. Most translators would have settled for a competent rendering, but Michelle's reputation was built on something more, an almost intuitive understanding of how meaning shifted between languages, how cultural context could transform a simple phrase into something entirely different. She'd always been fascinated by the spaces between languages, the places where one tongue ended and another began. Growing up in suburban Ohio, she'd discovered early that words were living things, capable of shape-shifting depending on who spoke them and who listened. Her high school Spanish teacher had been the first to notice her gift, but it wasn't until college that Michelle truly understood the power she possessed. 5 languages flowed through her mind with equal fluency: English, Spanish, French, German, and Polish. Each carried its own rhythm, its own way of seeing the world. She kept this ability largely private, revealing only what was necessary for her professional work. Experience had taught her that being too impressive too quickly made people uncomfortable, suspicious, or, worst of all, false in their admiration. The memory of her last relationship still stung. Marcus had initially seemed fascinated by her linguistic abilities, but as months passed, his interest had curdled into resentment. "You're always analyzing everything I say," he'd accused during their final argument. "Can't you just turn it off for once? Be normal?" The irony wasn't lost on her. He'd fallen for her mind, then tried to diminish it. Michelle shook her head, refocusing on the contract. She'd learned to compartmentalize these thoughts, to save her emotional processing for later. Work was sanctuary, a place where her abilities were purely professional tools rather than sources of personal complication. The crash came without warning. A coffee mug, white ceramic with the cafe's blue logo, sailed past her peripheral vision and shattered against the floor beside her table. Hot liquid splashed across the hardwood, sending the sharp scent of espresso cutting through the air. "Christ, I'm so sorry!" The voice carried genuine distress, along with an accent she couldn't immediately place. "I'm usually much more coordinated than this, I swear." Michelle looked up to find a man in his early 30s crouched beside her table, gathering the larger pieces of broken ceramic with careful hands. Dark hair fell across his forehead as he worked, and when he glanced up at her, his eyes were the color of storm clouds, gray with flecks of blue that seemed to shift in the light. "It's fine," she said, closing her laptop to protect it from any remaining liquid. "These things happen." "No, it's really not fine." He stood, ceramic fragments cupped in his palm. "I was reading while walking. Terrible habit. And I completely misjudged the distance to that chair." He gestured helplessly at the scene. "I could have damaged your computer, or worse, hurt you." There was something endearing about his genuine distress. Most people would have offered a quick apology and moved on, but this man seemed personally affronted by his own clumsiness. Michelle found herself studying his face as he spoke, noting the way his mouth pulled down at the corners when he was worried, the slight crease between his eyebrows. "Really, it's okay. she assured him. My laptop survived, and I needed a break anyway. A barista appeared with a mop and dustpan, and the man, still holding his handful of ceramic, looked around as if unsure what to do with the evidence of his accident. I'll take those, the barista said with practiced patience. And maybe next time, try not to read and walk simultaneously? Point taken. The man's smile transformed his entire face, erasing the worry lines and revealing an unexpected warmth. He turned back to Michelle. Can I at least buy you a replacement for whatever drink I nearly destroyed? It's the least I can do. Michelle glanced at her nearly empty mug. She'd been nursing the same cappuccino for 2 hours, long past any reasonable caffeine benefit. I wasn't really drinking it anymore. Then let me buy you a fresh one, please. I'll feel terrible for the rest of the day if you don't let me make this right somehow. There was something in his tone, not pushy or entitled, but genuinely concerned about her well-being, that made her reconsider. When was the last time someone had shown such immediate care for how their actions affected her? All right, she said, but only if you let me finish this section first. I'm translating a contract, and I lose my train of thought easily. Of course, take your time. He pulled out the chair across from her. Mind if I sit? I promise not to make any sudden movements near breakable objects. Michelle found herself smiling despite her usual caution around strangers. That would probably be wise. As she reopened her laptop, she was acutely aware of his presence across the table. He'd pulled out a book, something thick with an architectural drawing on the cover, but she noticed he kept glancing at her screen with curiosity rather than intrusion. German? He asked after a few minutes. Pharmaceutical patent law, she replied without looking up. Riveting stuff. Actually, it sounds fascinating. I mean the translation part, not necessarily the patent law, although that has its own complexity, I'm sure. He leaned back in his chair. I'm Tom, by the way. Tom Walker. Michelle Johnson. She saved her work and closed the laptop. And you're right about the complexity. Legal translation is like solving a puzzle where every piece has to fit perfectly, or the entire structure fails. That's exactly how I think about architecture. Tom's eyes lit up with genuine interest. Every element has to work both independently and as part of the whole. One miscalculation, one component that doesn't quite fit, and you can compromise the entire building. Michelle felt a flutter of recognition. Here was someone who understood the weight of precision, the responsibility that came with getting details right. What kind of architecture do you do? Mixed-use developments, mostly. I specialize in integrating historical preservation with modern functionality. Tom's hands moved as he spoke, sketching invisible structures in the air. There's something beautiful about honoring the past while building for the future. That sounds like translation, in a way, honoring the original meaning while making it accessible to a new audience. Exactly! Tom's enthusiasm was infectious. You're taking something beautiful and meaningful from one context and helping it flourish in another. Their conversation flowed with surprising ease. Tom told her about a project he was working on, converting a 1920s warehouse into affordable artist studios while maintaining its historical character. Michelle found herself sharing more than usual about her work, explaining how she'd gotten into translation, her love of traveling to immerse herself in different languages. How many languages do you speak? Tom asked, genuine curiosity in his voice. Professionally? 4, Michelle said, falling back on her standard response. Spanish, French, German, and English, obviously. I picked up a little Polish in college, too, but I'm nowhere near fluent enough to work in it. She noticed something flicker across Tom's expression. Interest, perhaps, or recognition, but it passed so quickly she might have imagined it. Polish is supposed to be incredibly difficult, he said. All those consonant clusters. I took a semester of it in college, but I barely managed basic greetings. It is challenging, Michelle agreed, though privately she thought Tom was being modest. Something about the way he'd pronounced consonant clusters suggested more familiarity with the language than he was admitting. The afternoon light had shifted, casting longer shadows across their table. Michelle realized they'd been talking for over an hour, and her coffee had grown cold again. I should probably get going, she said reluctantly. I still have work to finish tonight. Of course, Tom stood as she packed her laptop. "But I hope this won't be the last time we talk. Could I maybe take you to dinner sometime? Somewhere with less fragile dishware?" Michelle hesitated. Her usual instinct was to deflect, to find a polite way to decline. She'd built careful walls around her personal life, partly from past disappointments, and partly from the simple recognition that most people couldn't handle the full scope of who she was. But Tom felt different. He'd shown genuine interest in her work without trying to impress her with his own knowledge. He'd been clumsy and apologetic without being self-deprecating to the point of annoyance. Most importantly, he'd made her laugh without trying too hard. "I'd like that," she heard herself say. The smile that spread across Tom's face was worth the small leap of faith. They exchanged numbers, Tom's fingers careful as he entered her contact information into his phone. "I'll call you soon," he promised. "And thank you for being so gracious about my complete lack of spatial awareness." "Thank you for the coffee," Michelle replied. "Both the one you destroyed and the one you bought to replace it." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. As Tom walked away, Michelle remained at her table for a moment, processing what had just happened. She'd agreed to a date with a stranger, something she rarely did. But Tom hadn't felt like a stranger. Their conversation had been comfortable in a way that usually took her months to achieve with someone new. She pulled out her phone and scrolled to David Martinez's contact. David had been her closest friend since graduate school, the one person who knew about all her failed relationships and who never tired of her post-mortem analyses. "You sound different," David said when he answered. "Good, different. What happened?" "I might have a date," Michelle said, unable to keep the smile out of her voice. "Might have? Either you do or you don't." "I do. His name is Tom, he's an architect, and he accidentally destroyed a coffee mug while introducing himself." "Charming. Tell me more." As Michelle walked to her car, she found herself recounting the afternoon's events with more enthusiasm than she'd felt about anyone in months. David listened with the patience of a true friend, asking the right questions, offering gentle encouragement. "Just promise me you'll trust your instincts," David said as their conversation wound down. "You're too smart to ignore red flags, but you're also too cautious to see green lights sometimes." "When did you become a relationship counselor?" "When my best friend started sounding happy for the first time in ages." That evening, as Michelle finished the German contract, her phone buzzed with a text from Tom. "Hope you conquered the rest of that translation. Looking forward to continuing our conversation over dinner. How's Thursday?" Michelle typed her response quickly, before she could second-guess herself. "Thursday works perfectly. And yes, the contract is officially conquered." His reply came within minutes. "Excellent on both counts. I'll pick somewhere with unbreakable dishes." For the first time in months, Michelle found herself genuinely excited about the prospect of getting to know someone new. Tom had managed to slip past her usual defenses with a combination of genuine warmth and unexpected depth. As she settled into bed that night, she allowed herself to imagine what it might be like to let someone truly close again. She had no way of knowing that Tom Walker was also lying in bed that night, thinking about her. But his thoughts were considerably more calculated, already planning how to present himself in the most appealing light while keeping certain aspects of his life carefully hidden. The Polish language courses he'd mentioned so casually. He'd actually lived in Krakow for 2 years and spoke the language fluently. It was a skill he'd learned to compartmentalize, to use strategically. Tom smiled to himself in the darkness. Michelle Johnson was exactly the kind of intelligent, accomplished woman who would enhance his carefully constructed image. And the best part was how easily she'd accepted his modest deflection about his linguistic abilities. He could already tell she was the type who appreciated humility over boastfulness. Neither of them could foresee how that single lie, so small, so seemingly insignificant, would eventually unravel everything. Thursday evening arrived with the kind of crisp October air that made Chicago feel alive with possibility. Michelle stood before her bathroom mirror, applying mascara with more care than usual. Tom had suggested dinner at a small bistro in Lincoln Park, somewhere quiet where they could actually talk. Their first official date exceeded her cautious expectations. Tom arrived precisely on time, bringing a single white tulip instead of the predictable roses. "I noticed you had a Dutch art book on your table at the cafe," he explained. Tulips seemed more thoughtful than cliché. The gesture revealed an attention to detail that impressed Michelle more than grand romantic displays ever could. Throughout dinner, Tom demonstrated the same genuine curiosity about her life that had drawn her to him initially. He asked about her family in Ohio, her decision to move to Chicago, her dreams beyond translation work. "I'd love to work for an international humanitarian organization someday," Michelle found herself admitting over dessert. "Using languages to help people navigate crises, not just corporate contracts." "That's beautiful," Tom said, and his sincerity seemed genuine. "You could bridge more than just languages. You could bridge cultures, help people understand each other when everything else is falling apart." Over the following weeks, their relationship deepened through carefully chosen experiences. Tom took her to the Art Institute's Eastern European photography exhibit, where he demonstrated surprising knowledge about the region's history. At his apartment, he cooked pierogi from scratch, claiming he'd learned the recipe from a Polish classmate during his exchange program. "I picked up a little of the language while I was there," he said casually, sprinkling fresh dill over the dumplings. "Nothing impressive, just enough to order food and ask for directions. Dziękuję proszę, that's about my limit." Michelle smiled at his modest pronunciation. She could have corrected his accent, could have mentioned that she understood every word he'd just spoken, but something held her back. Tom seemed to appreciate humility over showmanship, and she found his unpretentious approach refreshing. During their third week of dating, Tom shared stories about his architectural work on adaptive reuse projects. "There's something poetic about giving old buildings new life," he mused as they walked along the lakefront, respecting what came before while imagining what could be. Michelle felt her walls continuing to dissolve. Tom's thoughtfulness felt authentic in ways she hadn't experienced before. He remembered details from their conversations, asked follow-up questions about her work, and never made her feel like her intelligence was something to be managed or diminished. By their sixth date, Michelle began imagining a future that included Tom Walker. For the first time in years, the possibility of genuine partnership felt within reach. She had no idea that Tom was equally pleased with how smoothly his careful cultivation was proceeding, already confident that his linguistic secret would remain safely hidden behind Michelle's trusting nature. The restaurant Tom chose surprised Michelle with its authenticity. Restauracja Krakow occupied a narrow storefront in Avondale, its windows steamed from the warmth inside. Red and white checkered tablecloths covered small wooden tables, and the air carried the rich scent of kielbasa and sauerkraut. "I've been wanting to try this place," Tom said as they were seated. A colleague mentioned they serve the most authentic Polish food outside of Poland itself. Michelle watched as Tom studied the menu with apparent concentration, occasionally asking their server, a middle-aged woman with graying hair pulled into a neat bun, for clarification about certain dishes. His Polish phrases sounded hesitant, carefully pronounced, exactly what she'd expect from someone with basic conversational skills. "CZY Mozisi Polisic Kost Dobrego?" he asked the server, requesting a recommendation with the slight awkwardness of someone still learning. The server smiled indulgently and suggested the pierogi ruski and kotlet shabowy. Tom nodded enthusiastically, translating for Michelle's benefit. "She recommends the potato and cheese dumplings and the breaded pork cutlet." "Sound good?" "Perfect," Michelle agreed, charmed by his effort to navigate an authentic experience for them. The evening unfolded beautifully. Tom shared stories about his latest project, converting a historic brewery into mixed-use lofts, while Michelle described her current translation nightmare involving pharmaceutical patent disputes. Their conversation flowed with the easy intimacy they'd developed over the past month. "I love watching you talk about your work," Tom said over their shared dessert of Cernik cheesecake. "Your whole face lights up when you're explaining some complex linguistic puzzle." Michelle felt warmth spread through her chest. "Most people find it boring." "Most people are idiots." Tom's smile was soft, genuine. Your passion is one of the things I find most attractive about you. When Tom's phone buzzed, he glanced at it with a slight frown. Sorry, it's work-related. Mind if I take this quickly? Of course not. Tom stepped outside, and Michelle could see him through the window, phone pressed to his ear. She was stirring honey into her tea when she heard a familiar voice near the restaurant's small bar area. Tom, nie spodziewałem się cię tutaj zobaczyć. Michelle's attention sharpened. The voice belonged to a man she'd never seen before. Tall, wearing a expensive-looking leather jacket. He was speaking Polish with native fluency, expressing surprise at seeing Tom here. Tom had just walked back inside, and his response froze Michelle's blood. Paul. Koza niespodzianka. Tom's Polish was perfect. Not the halting, careful pronunciation he'd used with their server, but the fluid, confident speech of someone completely comfortable in the language. Miloshi Widziek, Bracy. Michelle's hand tightened around her teacup. Tom was calling this man brother, not literally, but with the casual familiarity of close friendship. Paula laughed, a sound that carried easily across the small restaurant. Jak tam twoje dwie kobiety? Nadal udaje ci się żonglować z nimi? How are your two women? Are you still managing to juggle them? The words hit Michelle like a physical blow. Her training kicked in automatically, her mind translating even as her heart began to race. Tom's laugh was casual, confident. Michelle nic nie podejrzewa, za bardzo mi ufa, a Anna jest zajęta swoimi książkami i genealogia. Dopóki trzymam polski dla siebie z Anna, translator nigdy się nie dowie. Michelle doesn't suspect anything. She trusts me too much. And Anna is busy with her books and genealogy. As long as I keep the Polish to myself with Anna, the translator will never find out. The room seemed to tilt around Michelle. Anna. There was another woman named Anna, and Tom was deliberately hiding his Polish fluency to deceive both of them. Jesteś mistrzem manipulacji, Powell said with admiration. Jak długo planujesz to kontynuować? You're a master of manipulation. How long do you plan to continue this? Dopóki będę mogł, Tom replied with a shrug that Michelle could see in her peripheral vision. Michelle jest zbyt analityczna, żeby się związać na długo, ale Anna? He paused, and Michelle heard the cruelty in his tone. Anna jest idealna. Naiwna, ufna, IJEJ. Znajomość z polskiego sprawia, że czuję się wyjątkowo. As long as I can. Michelle is too analytical to settle down with long term, but Anna is perfect. Naive, trusting, and her knowledge of Polish makes her feel special. Michelle's vision blurred. She forced herself to remain perfectly still, to show no reaction. Years of professional training had taught her to maintain composure while processing devastating information. But this felt different. This was personal. This was her life being casually dissected by someone she'd begun to love. Ako Jesli Michelle Zidawi? Powell asked. And what if Michelle finds out? Tom's laugh was dismissive. Nie dowie się. Jest translatorka, ale nadal tylko Amerykanka. Nie przyszłoby JEJ do głowy, że znam polski tak dobrze. A nawet GDYBY. Zawsze mogę powiedzieć, że nie chciałem JEJ przytłoczyć. She won't find out. She's a translator, but still just an American. It wouldn't occur to her that I know Polish this well. And even if she did, I could always say I didn't want to intimidate her. The casual contempt in his voice, just an American, cut deeper than the revelation of Anna's existence. This was how Tom really saw her. Not as an accomplished professional with genuine linguistic gifts, but as someone too limited, too trusting, too naive to see through his deception. Michelle remained frozen as Tom returned to their table, his expression shifting seamlessly back to the warm, attentive boyfriend she thought she knew. Sorry about that, he said, settling into his chair. Crisis averted. Where were we? You were telling me about your project, Michelle managed, surprised by how normal her voice sounded. For the remainder of dinner, Michelle performed the role of the unsuspecting girlfriend, while her mind worked frantically to process what she'd learned. Tom was fluent in Polish. More than fluent, he was native-level comfortable. He was involved with another woman named Anna, someone who apparently shared his interest in Polish culture and genealogy. Most devastatingly, he saw both relationships as games to be managed through deception and manipulation. Every smile he gave her, every thoughtful question, every gentle touch, all of it felt poisoned now by the knowledge of his true nature. The man sitting across from her wasn't the authentic, caring partner she'd begun to fall for. He was a stranger wearing Tom's face, and she'd been too trusting to see the performance. "You're quiet," Tom observed as they waited for the check. "Everything okay?" "Just tired," Michelle lied. "Long day of translations." "Well, let's get you home then." His concern seemed genuine, which made it worse. How good was he at this performance? How long had he been perfecting the art of making women feel special while systematically betraying them? As they walked to Tom's car, Michelle's analytical mind began to take over from her emotional shock. She needed information. She needed to understand the full scope of his deception, to learn who Anna was and how long this had been going on. Most importantly, she needed to decide what to do with this devastating knowledge. The man she'd been falling in love with didn't exist. The question now was what she would do about the man who actually did. Michelle stared at her bedroom ceiling until 3:17 a.m., when she finally abandoned any pretense of sleep. Tom's words echoed in Polish, each phrase more devastating upon replay. She'd maintained perfect composure during the ride home, even accepting his goodnight kiss with apparent warmth. But alone in her apartment, the full weight of his betrayal crashed over her. By 4 a.m., she sat at her kitchen table with her laptop, channeling her anguish into methodical investigation. If Tom thought her analytical nature was a weakness, he'd underestimated what she could accomplish when that analysis turned adversarial. She started with social media, approaching it like a translation project requiring careful excavation of meaning. Tom's Facebook profile showed the version she knew: architectural projects, hiking photos, casual dinners with friends. But his tagged photos revealed a different story. Images from Polish cultural events she'd never heard him mention. Folk dancing performances, Polish-American Society fundraisers, traditional holiday celebrations. In a photo from last summer's Polish Constitution Day festival, Tom wore a traditional folk costume, dancing with easy familiarity. The caption was in Polish: "Kocham polskie tradycje." I love Polish traditions. The post had dozens of comments, all in Polish, all treating Tom as a beloved community member. Michelle's hands trembled as she translated the comments. Friends calling him our favorite Chicago Pole, someone thanking him for organizing last year's Wigilia dinner, another person asking when he'd bring that sweet librarian to the next event. Sweet librarian. Anna, Michelle searched systematically. Anna Brooks, Chicago librarian, Polish. The results came immediately. Anna Brooks, 29, worked at Harold Washington Library's local history department. Her professional bio mentioned her specialization in Polish-American genealogy research. Her own social media painted a picture of someone kind, scholarly, and deeply connected to her Polish heritage. The photos told a devastating story. Anna and Tom, at cultural events Michelle had never heard mentioned. Anna laughing at what looked like a Christmas party, Tom's arm around her waist with casual possessiveness. A recent post from Anna: "Grateful for Tom's help translating my great-grandmother's letters from Krakow. His Polish is better than mine." Michelle created a timeline, cross-referencing dates with painful precision. Tom had been with Anna at a Polish Easter celebration, the same weekend he'd told Michelle he was visiting his parents in Boston. The folk dancing photo was from a Saturday, when he'd claimed to be working on blueprints. Every lie was documented, cataloged, transformed from betrayal into evidence. The scope of his deception was breathtaking. Tom wasn't casually dating two women, he was maintaining two complete personas. With Michelle, he was the modest architect with basic Polish phrases. With Anna, he was the cultural enthusiast helping preserve heritage traditions. At 6 a.m., Michelle discovered Tom's LinkedIn had connections to 3 Polish architectural firms. His professional summary mentioned extensive international experience in Eastern European markets and fluency in Polish. Everything he'd hidden from her was prominently displayed for professional advancement. Her phone buzzed with a text from Tom. "Last night was perfect. Thank you for being so patient with my terrible Polish pronunciation at the restaurant. Coffee later?" The casual cruelty of it, thanking her for patience with pronunciation that was actually flawless, made Michelle's vision blur with rage. She'd been so focused on analyzing his words for sincerity that she'd missed the performance entirely. Another search revealed Tom's involvement with the Chicago Polish Business Network, where he served on the cultural committee. Board meeting minutes from 6 months ago listed his recommendations for engaging Polish-American professionals in heritage preservation initiatives. The Tom Walker in those minutes was articulate, passionate, deeply knowledgeable about Polish history and culture. Michelle sat back, staring at the evidence scattered across her screen. Tom wasn't just deceiving her about another relationship. He was deceiving her about his fundamental identity. The modest, self-deprecating man she'd fallen for was a fiction, carefully crafted to appeal to her preference for authenticity over flashiness. Her phone buzzed again. "Also, did you notice how impressed our server was with my pronunciation? Maybe I'm better at Polish than I thought." The emoji felt like a slap. He was actually amused by his own deception, confident enough to joke about it because he believed she'd never understand the truth. Michelle closed her laptop and walked to the window. Dawn was breaking over Chicago, painting the sky in shades of gray and gold. In 12 hours, her world had completely shifted. The question now wasn't whether Tom was deceiving her. The evidence was overwhelming. The question was what she would do about Anna Brooks, the sweet librarian who had no idea she was dating a masterful liar. For the first time since the restaurant, Michelle smiled. It wasn't a pleasant expression. The Harold Washington Library felt like sacred ground as Michelle approached the local history department. She'd fabricated a research request about Polish genealogical records, creating a plausible reason to seek Anna Brooks's professional assistance. Her hands trembled slightly as she approached the reference desk. "I'm looking for help with Polish ancestry research," Michelle told the young man at the desk. "Someone mentioned Anna Brooks might be the right person?" "She's our Polish-American specialist. Let me get her for you." Michelle's breath caught when Anna appeared. She was exactly as Tom had described in his cruel assessment, sweet-faced, with intelligent brown eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. Her cardigan was soft blue, and she wore a small silver cross at her throat. Everything about her radiated the genuine warmth that Tom found so naive and trusting. "I'm Anna Brooks," she said with a welcoming smile. "I understand you need help with Polish genealogy?" "Yes, I'm trying to trace my grandmother's family from Krakow," Michelle lied smoothly. "I have some documents, but they're in Polish and I'm struggling with the handwriting." Anna's face lit up with enthusiasm. "Oh, how wonderful! I love helping people connect with their heritage. Polish genealogy can be challenging, but it's so rewarding when you finally piece together those family connections." They settled at a research table, and Anna pulled out several reference books. As she explained the basics of Polish record-keeping systems, Michelle found herself genuinely impressed by Anna's knowledge and passion. This wasn't just professional competence. Anna truly cared about helping people discover their roots. "My own family came from a small village near Częstochowa," Anna shared as she showed Michelle sample documents. "Learning Polish was partly about understanding my great-grandmother's letters. She wrote the most beautiful descriptions of life in the old country." "Do you speak it fluently now?" Michelle asked, though she already knew the answer. "I'm getting there. My boyfriend has been incredibly helpful. He's fluent, lived in Poland for a while. He's been so patient with my pronunciation." Anna's smile was soft, affectionate. "It means everything to have someone who understands why connecting with your heritage matters, you know?" Michelle's throat tightened. Anna's gratitude was genuine, her affection for Tom real. She had no idea she was just another project in his portfolio of deception. That's wonderful that you have someone supportive, Michelle managed. He's amazing. Tom helps me practice conversation, and he's taught me so much about Polish culture that I never learned growing up. My grandmother would have loved him. Anna pulled out her phone, showing Michelle a photo from what looked like a Polish festival. He's the one who got me involved with the Polish American Cultural Center. I was too shy to go alone at first. The photo showed Anna and Tom in traditional folk costumes, dancing together with obvious joy. Anna looked radiant, completely happy. Tom's expression was harder to read. Pleased, certainly, but with an underlying calculation that Michelle now recognized. He sounds perfect, Michelle said, the words tasting like ash. I really think he might be the one, you know. Anna's voice dropped to a confidential whisper. We've been talking about visiting Poland together next year. He wants to show me all the places he lived when he was there. Michelle felt physically sick. Anna was planning a future with someone who saw her as entertainment, as a way to feel superior through manipulation. The genuine love in Anna's voice made Tom's casual cruelty even more monstrous. Your boyfriend sounds very knowledgeable about Polish culture, Michelle said carefully. Oh, he is. Sometimes I think he knows more about my own heritage than I do. Anna laughed. But he's so modest about it. He always says his Polish is terrible, but honestly, it's better than most of my family members who grew up hearing it. Michelle's decision crystallized in that moment. Anna deserved to know the truth, but not like this. Not as collateral damage in Michelle's own discovery. Anna deserved compassion, protection, and the chance to make her own informed choices. Thank you so much for your help, Michelle said, standing abruptly. I think I have enough to get started. Oh, but we barely scratched the surface. I have so many more resources. I'll be back, Michelle promised. Soon. As she walked away, Michelle heard Anna call after her. Good luck with your research. I hope you find what you're looking for. The irony was devastating. Michelle had found exactly what she was looking for, and it was worse than she'd imagined. Michelle found David Martinez at their usual lunch spot, a small Cuban cafe near the courthouse where he worked as a court translator. She'd texted him that morning with unusual urgency. Need to talk, it's about Tom. Can you meet? David was already seated when she arrived, concern etched across his features. He'd known Michelle through 3 failed relationships and had developed an almost protective instinct about her romantic life. You look like hell, he said without preamble. What did he do? Michelle slumped into the chair across from him, suddenly exhausted by the weight of her discovery. It's complicated. The best disasters usually are. Start from the beginning. She told him everything, the overheard conversation at the restaurant, Tom's fluent Polish, the casual cruelty of his words about both women. David's expression shifted from concern to fury as she described her investigation, Anna's innocence, the scope of Tom's deception. That manipulative piece of shit, David said when she finished. How are you not burning his apartment down right now? Because I met her, David. I met Anna. Michelle's voice cracked slightly. She's everything Tom said. Sweet, trusting, completely in love with him. She has no idea what he really is. So tell her. It's not that simple. David leaned forward, his protective instincts fully engaged. Like hell, it isn't. He's cheating on both of you, lying to both of you. She deserves to know. And then what? I destroy her world to make myself feel better? She's planning a future with him, David. She thinks he might be the one. Michelle twisted her napkin between her fingers. If I tell her the truth, I'm not just ending her relationship. I'm devastating someone who's done nothing wrong. Michelle. David's voice carried the patience of someone who'd had this conversation in various forms before. Listen to yourself. You're more concerned about protecting his other victim than protecting yourself. She is a victim. We both are. Exactly. And victims deserve the truth, even when it hurts. David signaled for coffee, giving Michelle a moment to process. What's really going on here? Because the Michelle I know doesn't let people walk all over her like this. Michelle stared at her hands. I keep thinking about all the times I analyzed his words, looking for signs of deception. I pride myself on understanding language, on reading between the lines. But I completely missed this. Because he's a professional manipulator, this isn't your fault. Isn't it? I'm supposedly this brilliant linguist, but I couldn't see through someone lying in a language I speak fluently. What does that say about me? David's expression softened. It says you're human. It says you wanted to trust someone, which isn't a character flaw, no matter what your ex-boyfriends told you. The waitress brought their coffee, and Michelle wrapped her hands around the warm mug. Anna said something that keeps haunting me. She told me Tom helps her connect with her heritage, that her grandmother would have loved him. He's not just lying to her, he's making her feel special about something that's completely false, which is why she needs to know. But what if knowing destroys her connection to that part of herself? What if she associates Polish culture with this betrayal and loses something precious? David studied her carefully. You're overthinking this because you don't want to face the hard truth, which is that you're scared. You're scared of confronting Tom, scared of the drama, scared of seeming like the jealous girlfriend. So you're intellectualizing this into some complex moral dilemma when it's actually pretty simple. Michelle bristled. That's not. When has avoiding confrontation ever protected anyone, Michelle? Ever? David's tone was gentle but firm. Your linguistic abilities didn't fail you. You've always been too careful, too afraid of making waves. Tom counted on that. The truth of his words hit like cold water. Michelle had always prided herself on being thoughtful, analytical, careful with her words and actions. But somewhere along the way, those traits had become shields against difficult conversations. So what do? You stop protecting everyone except yourself. You tell Anna the truth because she deserves it. You confront Tom because he needs to face consequences. And you stop acting like your intelligence is something to apologize for or hide. Michelle felt something shift inside her chest, a loosening of tension she hadn't realized she'd been carrying. You're right, about all of it. I usually am. It's one of my most annoying qualities. David's smile was warm. The question is, what are you going to do first? Michelle met his eyes, feeling stronger than she had in days. I'm going to plan exactly what to say to Tom. And then I'm going to say it. Good. And Michelle? David reached across the table to squeeze her hand. Your gift with languages isn't just about translation. It's about communication. Real communication. Something Tom knows nothing about. As they left the cafe, Michelle felt her analytical mind engaging with new purpose. She wasn't just going to confront Tom. She was going to dismantle his carefully constructed lies with the same precision she brought to complex translations. For the first time since the restaurant, she felt like herself again. Michelle set the scene carefully. She invited Tom to dinner at her apartment, preparing his favorite pasta dish while rehearsing the words she would use. When he arrived with his usual bouquet of flowers and that familiar warm smile, she felt her resolve waver for just a moment. You seem different tonight, Tom said, settling onto her couch with a glass of wine. More relaxed. It's nice to see. I've been doing some thinking, Michelle replied, pouring herself a generous glass. About us. About communication. Good thinking, I hope? Michelle studied his face. The easy confidence. The slight smile that had once made her feel special. Tom, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be completely honest with me. Of course. Always. The casualness of that lie strengthened her resolve. How well do you really speak Polish? Something flickered across Tom's expression. Too quick for most people to catch, but Michelle had spent years reading micro-expressions for her translation work. I told you, just basic phrases. Why? Because, Michelle said, switching seamlessly to Polish, Slyszałam taw restauracji z Polem, slyszałam każde słowo o mnie o Annie. I heard you at the restaurant with Powell. I heard every word about me and Anna. The color drained from Tom's face. For a long moment, silence stretched between them like a chasm. Michelle, I can explain. Explain what exactly? She continued in Polish, her voice steady and cold. Explain how you've been lying to me about who you are? Explain Anna Brooks? Explain how you called me just an American who would never figure out your deception? Tom's shock transformed into something harder. You speak Polish? Fluently. For years. Something you would have known if you'd ever been genuinely interested in who I actually am, instead of the version you wanted me to be. Look, the Polish thing. I just didn't want to intimidate you. I know how you get about languages, and I thought... Stop. Michelle's voice cut through his explanation. I know about Anna. I know about the Polish Cultural Center, about your involvement with the community, about the trips to Poland you told her about. I know everything. Tom's expression shifted again, and for the first time, Michelle saw his true face, calculating, cold, completely unrepentant. So what do you want? An apology? His voice carried an edge of irritation, as if her discovery was merely inconvenient. Yes, I speak Polish. Yes, I'm seeing Anna. But you're not exactly innocent here either, are you? Keeping your language abilities secret. Playing the modest translator while I'm actually what? While you're actually the kind of person who eavesdrops on private conversations and then stalks innocent people at their workplace. The audacity of it took Michelle's breath away. Even caught in his deception, Tom was trying to make her the villain. Get out, she said quietly. David signaled for coffee, giving Michelle a moment to process. What's really going on here? Because the Michelle I know doesn't let people walk all over her like this. Michelle stared at her hands. I keep thinking about all the times I analyzed his words, looking for signs of deception. I pride myself on understanding language, on reading between the lines, but I completely missed this. Because he's a professional manipulator. This isn't your fault. Isn't it? I'm supposedly this brilliant linguist, but I couldn't see through someone lying in a language I speak fluently. What does that say about me? David's expression softened. It says you're human. It says you wanted to trust someone, which isn't a character flaw, no matter what your ex-boyfriends told you. The waitress brought their coffee, and Michelle wrapped her hands around the warm mug. Anna said something that keeps haunting me. She told me Tom helps her connect with her heritage, that her grandmother would have loved him. He's not just lying to her. He's making her feel special about something that's completely false, which is why she needs to know. But what if knowing destroys her connection to that part of herself? What if she associates Polish culture with this betrayal and loses something precious? David studied her carefully. You're overthinking this because you don't want to face the hard truth, which is that you're scared. You're scared of confronting Tom, scared of the drama, scared of seeming like the jealous girlfriend. So you're intellectualizing this into some complex moral dilemma when it's actually pretty simple. Michelle bristled. That's not. When has avoiding confrontation ever protected anyone, Michelle? Ever? David's tone was gentle but firm. Your linguistic abilities didn't fail you. You've always been too careful, too afraid of making waves. Tom counted on that. The truth of his words hit like cold water. Michelle had always prided herself on being thoughtful, analytical, careful with her words and actions. But somewhere along the way, those traits had become shields against difficult conversations. So what do? You stop protecting everyone, except yourself. You tell Anna the truth because she deserves it. You confront Tom because he needs to face consequences. And you stop acting like your intelligence is something to apologize for, or hide. Michelle felt something shift inside her chest, a loosening of tension she hadn't realized she'd been carrying. You're right, about all of it. I usually am. It's one of my most annoying qualities. David's smile was warm. The question is, what are you going to do first? Michelle met his eyes, feeling stronger than she had in days. I'm going to plan exactly what to say to Tom. And then I'm going to say it. Good. And Michelle? David reached across the table to squeeze her hand. Your gift with languages isn't just about translation. It's about communication. Real communication. Something Tom knows nothing about. As they left the cafe, Michelle felt her analytical mind engaging with new purpose. She wasn't just going to confront Tom. She was going to dismantle his carefully constructed lies with the same precision she brought to complex translations. For the first time since the restaurant, she felt like herself again. Michelle set the scene carefully. She invited Tom to dinner at her apartment, preparing his favorite pasta dish while rehearsing the words she would use. When he arrived with his usual bouquet of flowers and that familiar warm smile, she felt her resolve waver for just a moment. "You seem different tonight," Tom said, settling onto her couch with a glass of wine. "More relaxed. It's nice to see." "I've been doing some thinking," Michelle replied, pouring herself a generous glass. "About us. About communication. Good thinking, I hope?" Michelle studied his face, the easy confidence, the slight smile that had once made her feel special. "Tom, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be completely honest with me." "Of course, always." The casualness of that lie strengthened her resolve. "How well do you really speak Polish?" Something flickered across Tom's expression. Too quick for most people to catch, but Michelle had spent years reading micro-expressions for her translation work. "I told you, just basic phrases." "Why?" "Because," Michelle said, switching seamlessly to Polish, "Słyszałam taw restauracji z Polem, słyszałam każde słowo o mnie o Annie." I heard you at the restaurant with Powell. I heard every word about me and Anna. The color drained from Tom's face. For a long moment, silence stretched between them like a chasm. "Michelle, I can explain." "Explain what exactly?" She continued in Polish, her voice steady and cold. "Explain how you've been lying to me about who you are. Explain Anna Brooks. Explain how you called me just an American who would never figure out your deception." Tom's shock transformed into something harder. "You speak Polish." "Fluently. For years. Something you would have known if you'd ever been genuinely interested in who I actually am instead of the version you wanted me to be. Look, the Polish thing, I just didn't want to intimidate you. I know how you get about languages, and I thought..." "Stop!" Michelle's voice cut through his explanation. "I know about Anna. I know about the Polish Cultural Center, about your involvement with the community, about the trips to Poland you told her about. I know everything." Tom's expression shifted again, and for the first time Michelle saw his true face, calculating, cold, completely unrepentant. "So what do you want? An apology?" His voice carried an edge of irritation, as if her discovery was merely inconvenient. "Yes, I speak Polish. Yes, I'm seeing Anna. But you're not exactly innocent here either, are you? Keeping your language abilities secret, playing the modest translator, while I'm actually what? While you're actually the kind of person who eavesdrops on private conversations and then stalks innocent people at their workplace." The audacity of it took Michelle's breath away. Even caught in his deception, Tom was trying to make her the villain. "Get out," she said quietly.